Chapter 1. I remember that day by the smell of jasmine. In Palo Alto, jasmine blooms so heavily in May that it makes you dizzy. That scent, sweet, heavy, almost cloying, always felt like the smell of happiness to me. The smell of home, the smell of everything being right. Now I can't stand to be around it. Now jasmine smells like the end. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where hedge fund managers jog in the mornings wearing $500 headphones, and in the evenings, nannies push kids in strollers that cost $3,000. Beautiful houses, beautiful lawns, beautiful lives. I thought my life was beautiful, too. I thought I was happy. I thought I had everything. A loving husband, a healthy son, a job that brought me joy. I thought so much, and I knew so little. I'm a French teacher, at a private school for the children of Silicon Valley employees. Little geniuses in designer sneakers. They read at 4, code at 6, and at 8 they're discussing their dad's company's IPO. I teach them to say merci and s'il vous plaît. I teach them that there are words you say with your heart, not just your lips. What irony. I taught other people's children about love, while in my own home, love had died a long time ago. I just didn't notice. My husband, Damien, is the head of the finance department at an international corporation. Offices in San Jose, Singapore, London, and Australia. He always talked about Australia with a special gleam in his eye. "Claire, the opportunities there are incredible," he'd say. I believed him. I believed every word he said. I believed he worked late because he was ambitious, because he was building our future, because he loved us. I believed my husband. That evening, I made a nice dinner. Salmon with lemon rice, arugula salad with pear and parmesan, tiramisu, my signature dish. I set the table with a white tablecloth, the same one we bought in Italy in a tiny shop in Florence, where the salesman told us in Italian that we were a beautiful couple. I blushed with happiness back then. It was a small point of pride. Setting the table so that, after 16 hours of meetings, Damien would stop being a number for at least 40 minutes. So he would remember he was a human being, that he had a home, that he had us. The three of us ate together, me, Damien, and our 6-year-old son Michael. We call him Mikey. Mikey was telling us about the school science fair. They launched a soda volcano. His eyes were shining. He was gesturing so wildly he almost knocked over his water glass. I laughed. I remember that laugh. It was real. It was the last real laugh of my life. "Dad, will you play with me after coffee?" Mikey asked, licking his tiramisu spoon. Cocoa was smeared across his cheek. He looked so beautiful in that moment, so alive, so mine asterisk. "You bet, champ," Damien replied warmly. In the same voice he used as a caring father and devoted husband. The voice I never doubted. The voice I trusted. And the voice in which, back then, I heard no falseness, no emptiness, not even the mechanical detachment of a man speaking to his son while his thoughts were already somewhere else. And not with his family. I didn't know it then. Back then, I was still a happy married woman, pouring coffee into cups after dinner when his phone vibrated. The sound was short, ordinary. I'd heard that sound 1,000 times. But that evening, it sounded different. Like the first rumble of thunder before a storm you can't see, but can already feel on your skin. Or does it just seem that way to me now? The phone was lying next to Damien, angled so that I could read the name lighting up the screen. Emma K. I kept pouring the coffee, not thinking anything of it. Emma was one of my husband's employees. I'd seen that name many times on his phone, heard it in his stories. Damien was the head of the department, and Emma was his direct subordinate. So her name came up in our house pretty often. Claire, Emma put together a great report on the Australian contract. Claire, Emma proposed a new budget planning scheme. Claire, Emma came up with a pretty interesting solution. He mentioned her as a sharp analyst. Never, not once, was there anything extra in his voice when he talked about her. No pause, no hesitation, none of that elusive warmth that betrays a man talking about his mistress. Now I want to laugh. I don't know what Emma was really like at her job. But my husband's performance was flawless. He was an actor, a real actor. Oscar-worthy, no less. I want to laugh again when I remember that day. I've cried all my tears, so now, instead of tears, I laugh. And it's good for my mood. Like some psychologists say, A fake smile sooner or later turns into a real one. So I just need to wait a little longer. But back to the past. I wasn't a jealous wife. I was never jealous. I didn't check my husband's phone, didn't read his messages, didn't grill him about his coworkers. We had trust, I thought. Absolute. Or did I just imagine all of it? Now I don't know anything. Absolutely nothing. I question every minute of our life together with Damien. Every I love you. Every you're the most beautiful. Every promise. Was it all a lie? Or just the last 2 years? Or from the very beginning, I'll never know the answer. And it kills me every time I close my eyes. Meanwhile, my husband's phone kept ringing. Damien heard it and sighed. Heavily. With that fake weariness meant to show how tired he was of constant interruptions. How he wanted to be with his family, but work wouldn't wait. Work, he said, standing up. Always bad timing. You know how these people are. They don't care about personal life. I didn't know those people. I never knew those people. But I nodded. I always nodded. I'm a good wife. Good wives don't ask questions. Good wives believe. Good wives iron shirts, make coffee, and don't snoop on phones. Good wives get infidelity as a gift for their goodness. Damien got up from the table. He pecked me on the cheek, dryly, on autopilot, like pressing the send button on a daily report, a mandatory operation before leaving. No more, no less. Then he leaned down to Mikey, ruffled his hair with those long fingers that I know now had stroked another woman's skin. I followed him to the foyer. Car keys, company logo bag, the jacket I bought him for Christmas. The lock on the front door clicked, a sound I'd heard hundreds of times. Hundreds, maybe thousands. But that click was the last click of my happy world. I sneer. I really didn't know it then. After seeing my husband off, I went back to the kitchen to clear the cups, clean up, and finish the evening. Mikey had already run upstairs. After dinner was his time for computer games, which always ended in an argument. I sighed. I'd clean up downstairs and then put my son to bed. After that, once I put Mikey to bed, I'd lie down in the empty, cold bed and wait for my husband. Wait for him to come home from work. I'm the understanding wife who only wants the best for her husband. That's what every late evening of his was like. That's what every evening of mine was like. A lonely woman in a big bed believing he'd come soon. I picked up a sponge to wipe the table. And then I noticed a vibration on the countertop. My husband's phone. It was lying next to a fruit bowl, sleek, black, deceptively minimalist, but definitely not cheap. Then again, my husband never liked cheap things. The screen was lit up. Someone was calling my husband. The same contact. Emma K., the same Emma who had just called him. Something important, I thought at that moment. And Damien, of all times, forgot his phone. The call ended. I breathed out. But within a second, the phone came alive again. It was Emma K. again, calling back again. I stared at that screen, at the name blazing on it, and didn't know what to do. Something inside me seemed to clench. Nothing had warned me, but I felt it. I sensed it. Like some ancient, animal survival instinct screaming, don't take it. Don't answer. Step away from that phone. Forget this call, and you'll save yourself. But I didn't listen. I didn't trust my inner voice. Maybe because I was used to trusting others, not myself. I did trust my husband so much. But at that moment, I wasn't thinking about all those subtleties. I didn't leave the phone where it was. Didn't go upstairs ignoring it. No, instead I grabbed the phone and rushed to the front door, threw it open. Outside, streetlights were on. It smelled of jasmine and freshly cut grass. The neighbor's lawnmower had stopped a minute ago. Somewhere a dog was barking. An ordinary, quiet evening. My husband's car, of course, was already gone. I only saw red taillights blink at the end of the street and disappear around the corner. At that moment, I realized he had left awfully fast. Too fast, like he was in a hurry. As if someone was waiting for him somewhere. This strange thought popped into my head, as if I were already ready to accuse my husband of something. As if I doubted that he had just torn himself away from his family and gone to work. How ridiculous, I thought then. Where else would Damien go if not to work? Right at that moment, the phone in my hand vibrated again. I automatically looked at the screen. Emma K. She was calling for the third time. I sighed. Despite that strange thought a minute earlier, of course, I didn't doubt my husband at all. I had no mistrust, no jealousy. It was just that Damien had forgotten his phone, and his employee kept calling him. Maybe it was something important, something urgent. Something Damien needed to know right away, and he had forgotten his phone. That was the only reason I decided to answer, not out of jealousy, not out of doubt. Only because I was worried about my husband's job. I thought Damien might even thank me later, say, "Claire, you saved me." Good wives always come through. And that was the only reason I pressed accept. Chapter 2. Finally, a woman's voice answered as I walked back into the house, into my cozy kitchen. The woman's voice was thick and sweet, like molasses. She said 2 words, just 2, but there was so much in them. So much impatience. So much intimacy. So much familiarity. She expected my husband to pick up. She expected him to answer. And when he did answer, when I, thinking I was doing a good deed, pressed that green button, she breathed out in relief. The voice was low, warm, unhurried, with a slight huskiness that comes after a long day or a long night. I'm a French teacher. I know intonation. I know what a trained voice sounds like and what a real one sounds like. This voice was real. It belonged to a woman who called this number often, very often, not as a colleague, not as a subordinate reporting on a project, but as a woman waiting for a man, as a woman already picturing him walking through the door. "Are you on your way yet?" she continued, not waiting for an answer. I was silent. I couldn't speak. There was a lump in my throat. My heart was pounding somewhere in my ears, in my temples, in my fingertips. I was gripping the phone so hard my knuckles were white. Employees don't ask their bosses questions like that, in that tone. Maybe I'm missing something, flashed through my mind. Meanwhile, the woman kept talking. Apparently, she mistook my silence for his asterisk silence. Or maybe she was used to Damien often being quiet when she talked. My head spun with thousands of past calls, when my husband would take phone calls while in the same room as me, on the same couch, right next to me. Most of the time, he wouldn't say anything, just listen. I always thought he was listening to his employees' report on their work. But it was her, apparently, I realized. Her and her low, honey molasses voice. "Had your fun playing the caring husband and devoted family man," the woman sneered. And from her voice, you could tell the sneer was malicious and condescending. I couldn't help it, I flinched. Why? First, because I realized that this woman, this Emma Kay, didn't take Damien seriously as a father or husband at all. It was strange, but that was the thought that came to me then. For her, our life, our family, it was all just a facade. A costume he put on when he came home, then took off when he came to her. I felt nauseous. I already understood that Emma Kay was more than just Damien's employee. I understood that my husband was living a double life, and the second life wasn't about work. It was about something else. I pressed my palm over my mouth. Caring husband and devoted family man. She knew about me, that my husband was married, that we had a son, and she called our life playing at being a caring husband and devoted father. That alone was enough to throw the phone away like it was something dirty, something disgusting. But the woman, as if testing me further, continued. "And now it's time to play the lover," she said, chuckling. It left me with not the slightest hope that this was only a misunderstanding. I closed my eyes, feeling my heart stop for a minute. I didn't want to hear any more. I wanted to press end. I wanted to never know this voice, never know these words. I wanted to stay in that world where men don't cheat and mistresses don't call after dinner while the wife is doing the dishes. But I didn't press end. I couldn't. Something chained me to that call. Masochistic curiosity, a desire to know the whole truth to the bitter end. Or just shock, the kind of shock where your brain refuses to believe and you wait for it all to be explained, to be a mistake, for her to say, "Hello, this is the corporate taxi service. Your ride is confirmed." "I put on that lingerie you like," my husband's mistress continued. Her voice dropped lower, more intimate. She spoke the way you only speak to someone you already share a bed with, someone whose hands know your body. Remember last Thursday? I froze. Last Thursday. I replayed last Thursday in my head. Damien said he had a meeting with the Australians. Because of the time difference, he had to go back to work after dinner. That evening, he came home very late. I remember I was already asleep. He woke me with a kiss on my shoulder. I smiled, groggy, thinking, he came back to me. He came home. And now, silence rose in my throat. He hadn't come back to me from work. He had come back to me from her asterisk. He kissed me with the same lips that had just kissed her. He held me with the same arms that had just held her. Last Thursday, that same day, that same night. I heard my heart pounding. Too loud, too fast. I was even afraid she would hear it. Would realize that it wasn't him on the line. There was something humiliating about it, me, the legal wife, afraid that my husband's mistress would recognize my breathing. "Hurry up and get here," she said, temptingly low. "I'm waiting." After those words, my breath hitched. I pressed end. The phone slipped from my hand. It fell on the kitchen floor, on the ceramic tile we'd picked out together, laughing at the third option. The sound was dull, not loud. Mikey was upstairs in his room with rocket wallpaper. He was still playing on his console and probably hadn't heard a thing. Thank God he hadn't heard. He shouldn't have seen his mother at the moment her world collapsed. I stood in the middle of the kitchen. The kitchen where our life had begun. Right here, we drank champagne the night we signed the house papers. I sat on that chair, barefoot in his shirt, and we made plans. "There will be a garden here," he said. "There will be swings for the kids here," I said. We put up the swings. We planted the garden, and he left for another woman. Right here, Mikey took his first step. I remember that day. He let go of my hand and took 3 wobbly steps toward Damien. Damien caught him, spun him around, cried. He cried tears of joy, or did I imagine that too? Now I don't know anything for sure. Right here, last Friday, Damien said he loved me. We were sitting on the couch, watching some movie. He put his arm around me and whispered in my ear, "You know I love you, right?" I nodded. I didn't doubt for a second. I was so stupid, so blind, so naive. He lied. Not just last Friday, maybe always. Maybe all these years he was just playing a role. The good husband, the good father, the good son-in-law. And the real him was their asterisk. With her, with the lingerie, with last Thursday. I picked up the phone. My hands were shaking. A violent tremor ran from my shoulders to my fingertips. I couldn't stop it. I squeezed his asterisk phone so hard the plastic creaked. I had a choice, or actually, maybe I never did. Either way, I decided I didn't want to stay in the dark. A rare moment. My husband's phone was in my hands, and my husband wasn't around. I realized I knew the code. Damien, by the way, never told it to me out loud, never wrote it in a text, never left it on a sticky note. But I'd seen him type the combination so many times, mornings, evenings, when Mikey asked to play a game, when his mom called, that I'd memorized it. Damien wasn't the type of man who hides his password. At least, he didn't hide it from me, because he was confident in me, confident that I wouldn't use it. And I did. 1403, March 14th, our son's birthday. Mikey was born on March 14th. Damien chose that date as his phone code, maybe to remember, or maybe to justify himself. I'm a good father. I even set the password to my son's birthday. Caring husband and devoted family man. I remembered the woman's words. At that moment, my husband's phone unlocked. Chapter 3. I opened their messages. And the world disappeared. It didn't shatter. Didn't crumble. Didn't explode. It just stopped existing. Only the messages remained. White and gray bubbles on the screen. Dates, photos. Even little hearts. Ordinary words that slowly stopped my heart, and intimate jokes that ripped it apart. Again and again, many times. For some reason, I scrolled their conversation all the way to the beginning. Only later did I realize I should have been trying to figure out when it all started. But then, I didn't realize it yet. I just scrolled. Until I found the first intimate exchange. 2 years. The first non-work-related message happened almost 2 years ago. Before that, there had only been short texts that fit within a boss-subordinate relationship. But then came, "That was hot, we need to do it again." My fingers trembled over the phone screen. That was hot, and that was already 2 years ago. I stared at the dates and refused to understand, refused to believe what I was seeing. 2 years of an office affair, 2 years of a relationship on the side. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a midlife crisis, not a random office fling on a business trip. This was 2 whole years. An entire second life I knew nothing about. I felt my legs give way. I stood in the kitchen, clutching my husband's phone with shaking hands, while months of our life flashed before my eyes. Birthdays, school events, Christmas, the trip to the ocean, family photos, dinner with the neighbors, our evenings on the couch. Throughout all of that, right next to my life, there was another one. A secret one. The real one. Without me. I started scrolling through their messages again, from the first intimate one to the last. There were hundreds, maybe even thousands. 2 years of constant texting. It had everything. Seemingly harmless ones. "Miss you. When can you stay over again? You look incredibly sexy in that dress." And then there were messages about me. "Did she suspect anything at the party today?" Emma K. wrote that to my husband, and he replied shortly, "No." I felt the blood drain from my face. I remembered. We did cross paths at events put on by Damien's company. I remember this Emma. Well, I remembered her now. He didn't introduce me to her, but Damien's deputy introduced her as one of my husband's most reliable employees. I covered my mouth with my hand in pain, remembering that girl. How she smiled when she said she enjoyed working with Damien. She also said that my husband was an unusually demanding boss, but that working under him made her feel truly alive. I froze. I remembered that even then, that phrase struck me as ambiguous. I remembered turning around to look at Damien, but seeing nothing in his eyes, not a hint of another feeling, beyond a slight tiredness from the daily grind. I relaxed. Naive, stupid Claire, whom her husband's mistress laughed at. Letting out a loud breath, I kept scrolling. Photos of restaurants, cafes, even nightclubs. I recognized some of them. Oh God, they went to the same places we did. That Italian restaurant in Santa Clara. In February, Damien said he was having dinner there with investors. I remember that evening. Mikey had a fever of almost 104. I was sitting by my son's bed with a wet cloth, changing compresses, taking his temperature every 20 minutes, while Damien texted. "Sorry, sweetheart, important meeting. Can't leave." And he was with her. I looked at the photo of a wine glass on a white tablecloth and felt something inside me slowly break. Not sharply. Worse. Quietly. Systematically. Irreversibly. I scrolled through several days of their conversation until my finger stopped on a message. "Are you staying at my place tonight?" Damien's reply. "Yes. What about your wife?" "I'll tell her the Sydney call ran long." I stared at the screen. Sydney. Australia. Of course, Australia. The endless Australia around which our life had revolved for the last 2 years was a cover. I remembered how many times I felt sorry for him. How many times I brought him coffee in his office late at night. How many times I said, "You work so hard." How many times I ironed his shirts while he supposedly saved a major contract. And all the while, he was driving to another woman. I felt nauseous. I abruptly put the phone down and pressed my palm to my mouth. No. 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 This is impossible for a person to bear. Physically impossible. The body isn't made for this much pain at once. Something crashed upstairs. Mikey probably dropped a toy. I flinched so hard it felt like I'd been hit. My son. God. Our child was still here. In this house. In this life that had just stopped being real. I forced myself to pick up the phone again. Scroll. Read. Kill myself further. Why? I don't know. Probably because a person faced with betrayal becomes like someone touching a broken tooth with their tongue. It hurts, unbearably, but you keep doing it anyway. I open the photos. Emma, that very employee. A young, predatory brunette. Beautiful hair. Long legs. Perfect skin. Younger than me. I looked at her and tried to understand. Was this why Damien started sleeping with her? Because she was younger, because she was sexier, because she was free and passionate while I was a boring mother. What was lacking in me? Was I not pretty enough? Not interesting enough? Not desirable enough? I understood as never before. I was just a wife to him, not a life partner but part of his household, like furniture, like a car. Like a servant who gets paid. Except maids get paid in money, and I got paid in illusions of a happy family life. While my husband was off wooing his passionate employee, I ran his home. Gave birth to his child. Handled the domestic chores. Was the one who knew the schedule of every pediatrician. The one who remembered when we were out of milk, coffee, or bread. Who fell asleep before midnight because she had to get up at 6 for work. Bought socks in bulk. Scheduled swim lessons for our son. Did the laundry. Took care of the house. I had become the drudgery of his life. And she remained the party. Free. Beautiful. Convenient. No child. No family dinners. No fatigue. But she only saw the best version of my husband, came an unexpected thought. Not the one who snores, not the one who gets annoyed about bills, not the one who forgets to take out the trash. She saw the man who came to her to take a break from his own family. It was a rational, correct thought, but it made me feel even worse. Because I saw what she got from him for that break. Gifts, countless gifts. Gold earrings, diamond rings, a new car. I laughed in pain and for some reason kept scrolling lower. Until I saw a message that would haunt my dreams for a long time. Your wife is cooking you dinner, but I'm getting myself ready for the morning. I read it once. Then twice. Then 3 times. The letters blurred before my eyes. She was laughing at me. They were both laughing at me. While I set the table. Bought Christmas presents. Organized family dinners. Asked him if he was tired. I was a topic for their inside jokes. She laughed at me, and he didn't stop her. He let her do it. He showered her with expensive gifts. I doubled over. I leaned forward, put my elbows on my knees, and squeezed my eyes shut. I was going to be sick. Physically sick from the humiliation. But instead, the tears came. The first ones. Quiet. Hot. Shocked. They flowed on their own. I didn't even realize I was crying at first. Tears dripped onto the phone screen, blurring the words. I wiped my face with my palm and looked at the messages again, spotting an address. It was a hotel, right here in our city. Well, a suburb where they'd spent a quiet weekend while I thought he had a team building event. I started scrolling further, looking for addresses. There were many. So many, they traveled not for work. I mean, I thought it was work, but it was actually their private fun. For 2. Hotels in San Francisco. In New York. In Istanbul. I looked at the date of their Istanbul booking and went cold. It was our wedding anniversary. Damien had canceled our dinner that night. Said he had to urgently fly to a meeting. I sat alone in the restaurant for almost 40 minutes. I remember the waiter looking at me with pity. I defended my husband back then. Smiled. Said, he has a very demanding job. And meanwhile, he was flying to Istanbul with another woman. I closed my eyes. God. How many countries had he traveled with her? How many nights had he spent with her while I spent them alone in an empty bed, thinking my husband was working day and night for the good of the family? I wanted to howl from the pain. But as if that wasn't enough, new pain came after it. I stopped thinking about when Damien was with asterisk her asterisk. I started thinking about when he was with asterisk me asterisk. How many times had he kissed me after her? How many times had he lain down next to me, smelling of another woman's perfume, and I hadn't noticed anything? My breath hitched again. I felt such intense hatred for myself that I couldn't even take a breath. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted a man so much? But then another thought came. No, it's not my fault. I trusted my husband, not just some random man. I trusted Damien, who had sworn to love and protect me for life. It's not my fault that he deceived me. It's him, it's all his fault. The person I trusted most in the world. I looked at the phone again. I needed to think. Not cry. Not die. Think. Because I have a son. I forced myself to take the first screenshot. Then the second. The third. My hands were shaking so badly, I kept pressing the wrong button. Screenshot. Send to my email. Next. Mechanically. As if I wasn't a wife anymore, but a detective at a crime scene. Although, I guess that was it. This was asterisk a crime scene. A crime against my life. I found her address. Santa Clara. 15 minutes from Damien's office. 15 minutes, very convenient. I looked at the map and felt something almost animalistic rise up inside me. 15 minutes. He could get to his mistress faster than to the grocery store we usually went to. I remembered all the evenings he texted. Working late. Really rough day. Don't wait up. And then came home tired, kissed my temple, and went asleep. God. I was sleeping next to a stranger. I didn't know who Damien Brennan was anymore. Not at all. And the worst part wasn't the infidelity. Not the sex. Not the hotels. Not her lingerie. The worst part was the scale of the lies. For 2 years, he looked me in the eye. For 2 years, he said, I love you. For 2 years, he hugged our son. For 2 years, he ate breakfast with me every morning. And all that time, there was another woman somewhere nearby who knew my husband better than I did. I sat in the middle of the kitchen with his phone in my hands and suddenly realized one horrible thing. My marriage didn't end today. It ended a long time ago. I just found out about it now. Chapter 4. For the first few minutes, while I was reading my husband's messages with his mistress, I was still breathing. I was stiff, frozen, lifeless, but I still existed. Yes, existing only out of inertia. Yes, inside I was already empty, absolutely empty, like a house stripped of all its furniture. But I was still there. But then the shock that had been holding me like an icy shell finally cracked, and it cracked somewhere in my chest. In that place where love had lived, where faith had lived, where hope had lived, it burst like glass from a blow. And from the crack, it poured out. Tears, not quiet ones, not the sparse tears a woman can dab away with a handkerchief. No, sobs, loud, convulsive, helpless. I pressed my hands over my mouth so as not to disturb Mikey playing upstairs, and I choked. I cried like I had never cried in my life, not even when my grandmother died, not even when I fell off a horse at 12 and broke my arm, not even when Damien said we couldn't go to Paris because of his work. I slid off my chair and sat on the kitchen floor, right on the cold tile, pulled my knees to my chest, wrapped my arms around them. It got a little easier. The fetal position, the pose of a child hiding from the dark. But what was I hiding from? The truth? Myself? Him? From the two of them who right now maybe were together. While I sat on the floor in a puddle of my own tears, she was putting on that lingerie, and he was taking off the shirt I'd ironed that morning. The thought hit me with renewed force. I wailed, silently. Mikey was playing upstairs. I could hear the sound of his console. Let him play. Don't let him come downstairs yet. He shouldn't see his mother like this. Shouldn't hear these sobs. Shouldn't ask, Mom, why are you crying? When I wouldn't know what to say. Because your father loves someone else, honey. Because our family was a fraud. Because I'm an idiot who didn't see the obvious for 2 years. God, it hurt so much. This wasn't the pain of cutting your finger, not the pain of falling off a bike. This was the pain of your past no longer being true. Every memory, a lie. Every holiday, a lie. Every smile, a lie. Everything I thought was mine turned out to be someone else's. This house, I thought it was ours. It turned out it was mine. He just lived in it. This bed, I thought it was ours. It turned out it was mine. He slept in it when he wasn't sleeping in another. Those photos on the walls. I thought they were of our family. In one, he has his arm around my shoulders and I'm laughing. The same week, he was probably holding her. The same arms, the same smile, a different woman. I remembered our wedding, which we had right by a vineyard. The sun was shining around us. Birds were singing. A summer breeze ruffled the emerald green leaves. My dress gleamed in the sunlight, and Damien cried when I walked down the aisle. I thought then, he really loves me. I walked toward him down the white runner, clutching my bouquet of peonies, crying myself. We were both crying. The priest said, "You may kiss the bride." Damien kissed me so tenderly, so reverently that the female guests gasped. I thought, this is forever. Now I think, maybe he wasn't crying from happiness. Maybe he already knew then that he didn't know how to be faithful. Maybe he was crying with relief, finally married, now he could relax. Or maybe the sun was just in his eyes. I don't know. I'll never know. At completely the wrong time, I suddenly remembered how we chose Mikey's name. Damien insisted on naming our son after his grandfather, who had died the year before our wedding. "Claire, it's important to me," he said. "Let him be Michael after my grandfather. He was my hero." I agreed immediately. I always agreed. I thought that was love, giving in. Now I think, what would have happened if I hadn't agreed with his decision? What would have happened if I hadn't been a doormat for him to wipe his feet on? Closing my eyes, I remembered last Christmas. We were sitting by the fireplace. I'd bought a new blanket, soft, woolen, with reindeer. Mikey was assembling a construction set, a huge spaceship from 1,000 pieces. Damien put his arm around me and said, "You're the best wife in the world." His hands were on my waist. I leaned into him. I felt the warmth of his body, the smell of the Christmas tree, the crunch of snow outside the window. I thought, this is happiness. This is it, real, and his hands the same hands that had held her. That same day, maybe that morning, maybe during a lunch break, maybe the day before when he said he was working late to close out a report. I closed my eyes and saw her, Emma, with her black lingerie, with her voice, with her "Remember last Thursday." I opened my eyes. I was trembling. I forced myself to stand up. My legs wouldn't hold me. I leaned on the countertop, then on the wall, made it to the sink, turned on the water. Cold, cupped my hands, splashed my face, again. Water ran down my cheeks, mixing with tears. I looked out the window, dark, streetlights on. Smell of jasmine, the neighbor's house, light in the living room. They're fine. Everyone is fine. Only my world has collapsed. At some point, I thought about calling my mom. She's in Ohio, always in Ohio. She didn't like that I moved to California. "Claire, those are strangers there. There's no soul there." I didn't listen. I was in love. I believed in Damien. I believed in our future. What would I tell her now? "Mom, your daughter is an idiot, didn't notice the cheating for 2 years." Mom would say, "I told you not to marry a finance guy." She did, 100 times. "Claire, find a teacher like me, a quiet life, no corporate drama, no business trips, no late-night meetings." I didn't listen. I loved Damien and I didn't care who he was. Actually, I was proud of him. My husband, he's the head of a department at a huge firm, an influential man. And that man chose me. My legs gave way again, and I slid back down onto the floor, exhausted. I realized I couldn't call my mother. Not now. I wouldn't be able to talk to her anyway. Only one word was spinning in my head like a broken record. Betrayal, betrayal, betrayal. Damien betrayed me. Actually, he didn't just betray me. He betrayed us asterisk. Our family, our son, our past, our future. He stole 2 years of my life and gave them to another woman. I sat on the floor until I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Headlights swept across the kitchen window, white light cutting through the darkness. The engine died. A car door slammed. Footsteps on the gravel, keys in the lock. Damien was back. Chapter 5. I heard the front door open. Then I heard my husband's footsteps. Damien walked into the foyer first, then into the kitchen. I was lying on the floor in the dim light, and he didn't notice me. Not at first. He had obviously come back only for his phone. Damien had no reason to scrutinize what was at his feet. But then he flicked the light switch, and the bright light from the chandelier flooded the kitchen, exposing everything that had been hidden until that moment. Damien immediately saw me, sitting on the floor, face swollen, wet with tears, his phone in my hand, red eyes staring at him in a way they never had before. He squinted. "What happened?" he asked. And I remember his voice. I remember it well. His tone, his familiar cadence, his calmness. Yes, there was no alarm, no worry, not even the kind of fear with which a loving husband would ask his wife, sitting on the floor in a dark room, what was wrong. There was none of that in Damien's voice. I remember this very clearly. There was only bewilderment, as if he simply couldn't understand why I was here, why I wasn't in bed, why I looked like this. He walked over to me, bent down, put his hand on my shoulder, exactly the same way he'd done 1,000 times, firmly, condescendingly, like an adult who'd come to solve a child's problem. "What?" he repeated, warmer, softer, in that voice people use with scared children. "What's wrong, Claire?" I looked up. I looked at his face. That handsome, familiar face I had loved for so many years. The face of the man who, 5 minutes ago, had turned back on his way to his mistress's because he'd forgotten his phone on the kitchen counter. What struck me then was that there was no guilt whatsoever on Damien's face. No fear that it was because of him. Not even curiosity, really. Just surprise. The surprise of a man who has his own plans for the evening and for whom you are not a priority. He didn't know. He had absolutely no idea that I knew. He thought he was still playing his game, and winning. I held out the phone to him. "Your mistress," I said. "She called to say she's waiting for you." My voice sounded foreign, hoarse like after laryngitis, dry as sand. I didn't recognize it. The woman saying these words, she wasn't me. I'm not the one whose husband cheats. I'm not the one who sits on the kitchen floor holding a phone. I'm not the one who cries over a man. I'm strong. I handle things. I'm a teacher. I'm a mother. I don't cry on the floor over a lying man. But I was crying, and my tears spoke louder than any words I had ever uttered. "You're Emma," I continued hoarsely, staring into Damien's black eyes. I used to think those were the most beautiful eyes in the world. Now I understood. Those were the most lying eyes in the world. Those eyes silently looked back at me. "She's waiting for you," I said. "In lingerie. She's waiting for you to come to her tonight. Do you remember what she wore last Thursday, Damien?" I laughed with my dry, cracked lips. "I remember last Thursday. You said you had a meeting with the Australians. You left after dinner. Came back late. I was asleep. You woke me with a kiss. Do you remember?" She remembers. Damien's face changed. I had never seen that color on his skin before, gray-green, like swamp water, like the sky before a tornado, like the face of a man who's been caught. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Claire," he said, this is a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. 2 years, thousands of messages, hundreds of photos, meetings, hotels, last Thursdays, and he calls it a misunderstanding. "My colleague, she's just joking like that," he continued. His voice trembled. Just a little, so little he probably didn't even notice it. Only I noticed. I, the woman who knew every intonation of his voice, who loved him more than anyone or anything in the world. "It's kind of normal in their department, that kind of joking," he added after a slight pause. "You know, I told you, the girls like to mess around. Emma's quite the joker." Damien looked at me and repeated with emphasis. "I told you about that kind of joke." Actually, there were no jokes, and he had never told me anything of the sort. Never. But I understood why, at that moment, he was trying to pretend that it existed. What else could he do after I had picked up and answered his mistress's call? It's just a joke, my husband continued to convince me. They even do that sort of thing between the girls, like one is sleeping with the other's husband. Crazy, twisted pranks. I started trying to put a stop to it, but that kind of informal, chummy attitude and weird humor actually, strangely enough, boosts team spirit. He winced. I warned them not to dare do anything like that, that if anyone ever dared to play that kind of joke with my wife. He didn't finish, just snorted in irritation, showing his indignation, very, very convincingly. So his Emma Kay was a joker, that's what he called her. The woman who had waited for him in lingerie for 2 years, who had gotten to know his body, who had written "miss you," who had called him my love, a joker. I suddenly thought that if I hadn't had time to check his phone, maybe I would have taken the bait. Maybe I would have believed him. Calmed down and continued happily sharing him with another woman, never suspecting a thing. Because believing that my husband, my loving, caring husband, was having an intimate relationship with another woman, that was impossible to believe. If I hadn't had the proof. Unfortunately for Damien, and fortunately for me, I had managed to look at his phone. And so, his explanation that it was just a bad joke by his female coworkers, it didn't work. I looked my husband in the eyes, those very eyes that were now looking at me with crystal clear honesty. Those very eyes that never left mine and we swore eternal love. Those very eyes that looked at Mikey when he was born and filled with tears. Those very eyes that looked at me last Friday and said, "I love you." "I saw your messages, Damien," I said wearily, endlessly weary, the way you get weary after a long illness, after an operation, after having your heart cut out without anesthesia. 2 years, photos, hotels. I miss you, come over. I shook my head. "Don't," I said quietly. "Please don't lie. You're insulting both yourself and me with your lies." When I said this, my husband tensed, then froze, and fell silent. Damien was quiet for a long time. So long that I started to think maybe he would say something important now. Maybe he would say, "I'm sorry." Maybe he would say, "I love you, it was a mistake." Maybe he would say, "I'll leave her." I waited. Foolish me, I was still waiting. I don't know for what. No scenario, I later played out in my head, seemed like something I could accept. Apparently, I didn't understand that yet back then, and that's why I waited. But my husband understood it immediately. He crouched down in front of me, reached out his hand toward me, and when I shrank back, he simply lowered it. We sat on the kitchen floor like two boxers after a knockout. He looked at me, I looked at him, and I saw something change in his eyes. The fear was leaving. The panic was leaving. Something else was taking their place. Calculation, calm, a decision. He had clearly realized. Pretending was no longer possible. Chapter 6. Suddenly, Damien stood up. Then he walked over to the stove, turned off the light that was shining directly into my eyes. In the resulting half-darkness, he turned toward me, and his face had changed. The softness was gone. Even if it was superficial, not real softness, it was gone. The warmth was gone, too. Only hardness remained. Cold, businesslike. The same one he used when speaking to subordinates when he wanted to push through his decision. "Listen, Claire," he said in a different tone. "Let's not have hysterics. Nothing really happened. When you get right down to it, nothing happened. Yeah, I'm having a little fling with a young employee. But it's just a minor thing, nothing serious. I love you, and I want to keep the family together." I lifted my head. "What?" I thought I must have misheard. Damien shrugged. "I love you, she's just a body. Fresh meat I felt like nibbling on, nothing more. It doesn't affect our family, our relationship, our marriage, so stop having hysterics." Stop having hysterics. I was sitting on the floor with a swollen face because I'd just found out my husband had been sleeping with his subordinate for 2 years, and he was telling me not to have hysterics. "I'm a man, Claire," Damien continued as if nothing had happened. His voice was gaining strength. He could feel I was weaker, that I couldn't argue, that I hadn't yet recovered from the shock. "I need variety." Variety, 2 years of cheating, 2 lives, 2 women, 2 faces. He called it variety as if he were talking about a menu in a restaurant. She's trying to keep her job at our company in my department, and she's willing to do anything for that. Any kind of acrobatics in bed, whatever I want. It's convenient for me, too. She's always right there whenever I feel like it. I use her, she uses me, it's fair. You could call it a strictly business arrangement, nothing personal, just sex. Nothing personal, I said, stunned. Damien, you've been sleeping together for 2 years. You've traveled to more countries with her than with me. Thousands of messages, thousands of I miss you, thousands of you're mine. It doesn't mean anything, my husband hissed. The trip to Istanbul with her instead of our anniversary, that doesn't mean anything either, I asked, laughing bitterly. A romantic dinner at a restaurant while I was here desperately trying to bring down Mikey's fever, that doesn't mean anything either. My husband's face instantly went white. You. I laughed. Where's the man who cried at our wedding? I asked. Where's the father who rocked Mikey in his arms? Where's the person I lived with for 8 years? Or was he never there? Or was it this one from the very beginning, cold, calculating, who calls infidelity variety and his mistress nothing personal? My husband leaned toward me. I hinted to you about going to Istanbul. I started talking about it several times, saying I wanted to spend our anniversary in Turkey. But you kept brushing it off, saying you had your school. He snorted. I make a 6-figure salary, but you still cling to your teaching salary like it's something important. I froze, frozen with indescribable horror. Is this my husband? Is mine saying such horrible things right now? I couldn't catch my breath. I felt like I couldn't speak anymore. But it wasn't necessary anyway. My husband already understood what I wanted to say. Damien laughed, and this laugh didn't resemble a normal human laugh, more like the rasp of a crow. I'm a man who's not used to sitting by a sick child's bedside. I love you, Claire. I love our son. I'd get the moon for you if I had to. He squinted. Or I'd buy any babysitter, any doctor, because I don't make a very good babysitter myself. I flinched. Apparently, this was the most honest and direct answer I could have hoped for. And I want you to understand something, Damien continued, not taking his eyes off me. So you understand right away how things stand. I'm not giving you a divorce. Don't even dream about it. That's not up to you, I whispered, still in a state of horror. You can't stop me. You think so? My caring and loving husband chuckled. Then he continued, his voice getting even harder. If we get divorced, your comfortable life will end immediately. I don't care, I shook my head. Are you sure? You can't afford this life on your own. What's left for you? You'll go back to Ohio to your mom. Damien kept pressing, systematically crushing me with facts, like in negotiations when he was forcing through a contract. And Mikey, Claire, have you thought about what will happen to him? Because of your foolishness, he'll have to switch to a regular school, in a regular neighborhood. All his friends will stay here. All the teachers he already loves will stay behind, too. No more science experiments like they do now. No more balanced meals. Damien sneered. Is that what you want for your son? Damien's gaze was burning into me. Skillfully, cruelly, he knew my weak spots. He knew that personally I wasn't afraid of anything. I wasn't attached to anything. I was ready to live in a tiny apartment, eat cheap pasta. That's how we started out together. But my son, I was willing to sacrifice myself, but not him. And Damien, knowing this, was using that knowledge against me. Cold-bloodedly, without a shred of conscience, discussing our son's future. The man I loved was now looming over me, threatening me with my own child's future. You're cruel, Damien, was all I could manage to say. You're the one about to destroy our family out of stupidity, my husband snorted. And I'm the cruel one. His question sounded like a mockery. Out of stupidity, I repeated slowly. You're calling your affair with your employee stupidity. She means nothing. She never meant anything. Of course not, I laughed. 2 years of betrayal, Damien. 2 years of lies. 2 years of you looking me in the eye and lying. 2 years of you lying to our son. Every evening you were absent. Every weekend you were with her instead of us. Don't you dare, Damien barked, his eyes narrowing. Don't you dare say I didn't give you enough attention. I looked at him in amazement. I fulfilled your every demand, your every wish. My husband gestured around our kitchen. You have a beautiful home, darling, in one of the most expensive places in the world. You have an expensive car. You eat only organic food. You sleep on the most expensive mattress. You wear only expensive clothes. Damien squinted. Our son goes to one of the most expensive schools in the U.S. His toys, his computers, all of it costs more than some families earn in a year. He squinted. And I gave you all of this, so don't you dare reproach me for the little joys I allowed myself. Little joys, I thought I'd misheard. Damien, you're talking about your mistress. I already told you I don't love her. I never did. My husband winced. I love you, he said, not looking at me. I love Mikey. Emma means nothing. Don't think this is serious. I'll stop. Tomorrow, I promise. You think that will change anything? I didn't believe him, looking up at my husband. You seriously think after all of this we can go back to how it was, like nothing happened? My husband shrugged. We can if you try. Damien squinted. Claire, don't be a fool. If you decide to take my family away from me, I'll take away what's most precious to you. He reached out and patted my cheek softly. You're smart. You have to understand that with my money, I can easily get custody of our son. Hearing this, I flinched in fear, and I think that's what made my husband slow down his plans just a little. I even saw a small flicker of guilt in his eyes, or maybe I imagined it. Damien paced the kitchen. I promise you this story is over. I'll even find a way to fire that girl. We'll take a vacation. Somewhere to Acapulco, huh? Or maybe you want Venice. It's romantic. Or somewhere like Monaco. You can practice your French. Damien spoke with fervor, beautifully, engagingly, sincerely. Promising as sincerely as he promised on our wedding day to love me forever. As he promised, we would be so happy in this house when we bought it. As he promised, he would always be with us when I gave birth to Mikey. My husband, apparently, found it easy to make promises, and just as easy to break them. Damien caught my eye, and his face instantly hardened. But if you file for divorce, he hissed firmly, you'll destroy your own life. I won't give you our son. So think about it. Think long and hard before you take that risk. With those words, he left the kitchen, never having taken his phone from my hands. Chapter 7. That night, Damien stayed home. He acted like nothing had happened, calm, serene. After threatening to take my child away, he went upstairs. I heard him go into Mikey's room. My heart started pounding. I thought Damien was already planning to take my son. I even jumped to my feet, ready to race after them. But then I realized he had just gone to put Mikey to bed. To make sure Mikey didn't see me crying. At first, I'll admit, I felt some warmth from Damien's actions. My husband was being tactful. I went upstairs, to the guest room, locked myself in to take a shower, to wash away the tears and at least try to look somewhat human again. And it was right then, as I stepped under the water, that I understood. His concern for our son wasn't generosity on Damien's part. No, absolutely not. By doing that, he killed two birds with one stone. He prevented our son from seeing me upset. He hid from our child that things weren't right in our family. And he did it not so much for Mikey's sake, but largely for his own, since he was the reason for my hysterics. And secondly, my husband had just demonstrated to me that he was capable of taking care of our son. And if I decided on a divorce... Well, I thought at that moment, he explicitly told me what awaits me if I decide to go through with it. I stayed in the guest room that night. But I didn't sleep. I couldn't fall asleep. I spent the whole night staring at the ceiling, mentally replaying my husband's words. About how he wouldn't give me a divorce. About how his affair with his employee was just his little whim. And since he had provided me with such a comfortable life, I had no right to even open my mouth. and if I tried to destroy our family, he would take my child away. I replayed every word, every thought he had expressed, hundreds of times, until a complete picture formed in my head. And by morning, I understood something. The husband I had loved all those years didn't exist. I had loved a ghost. I had loved a fake. The husband the real Damien showed me, not who he actually was. This one, the real one, I didn't like. He scared me. Actually, he disgusted me. And I understood something else. If I stayed with him, if I continued living in this marriage, with this person I didn't know, but whom I feared and didn't respect, I would destroy myself. And a destroyed mother is not what Mikey needs. You can't live with someone who betrayed you, who lied to your face, who called my pain, hysterics, and his infidelity nothing. I would wake up every morning, looking into his eyes, remembering her voice, and wondering if this was real or if he was just playing family again. No, I said quietly out loud, I'm not doing that. And not even because I didn't want to, but because I simply couldn't. I closed my eyes to give myself some rest. The choice was made. I would have to go through a divorce. Chapter 8. That morning was strange. We had breakfast together, the three of us, like the good old days. Except there was nothing good about it anymore. Mikey didn't understand it yet, but the two of us, Damien and me, had already become strangers. Not enemies yet, but how long until we got there? Until I file for divorce, I thought, clearing away our son's dishes. Damien also got up from the table. Thanked me for breakfast, though I hadn't made anything for him. He fixed his own coffee and sandwich, kissed our son, even pecked me on the cheek goodbye, as if nothing had happened yesterday, and left for work earlier than usual. Probably eager to make up for lost time with Emma. I didn't say anything, didn't object. Not just because Mikey was at the kitchen table watching us, but more because I couldn't quite believe that my husband, whom I had caught cheating just yesterday, could calmly eat breakfast, acting like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't found me sobbing on the floor, like he hadn't called his 2-year affair a little joy, like he hadn't threatened to take Mikey away if I dared to break up our marriage. After Damien left, I went upstairs to our bedroom. I got dressed, grabbed some documents, picked up my son. Then I drove him to school along the usual route. I had about 2.5 hours before my lessons, and I usually spent them at a little coffee shop on the corner, preparing for class. But today, I couldn't be bothered with my own little joys. I laughed to myself. My little joys are a cup of coffee and a French novel, while my husband, S, was a full-blown affair with a real, live woman. Thinking about it brought back that familiar, gnawing pain, and that forced me to get myself together and head to a place I'd found at dawn. A lawyer's office. I remember the way to her office vividly for some reason. The sun was shining. People were rushing around, going about their business. The world hadn't ended. The world kept spinning. Only my world had stopped. I sat behind the wheel, gripping it so hard my knuckles were white, repeating to myself, "You are strong. You can do this. You are doing this for yourself, for Mikey, to wake up one day and not feel this pain." The lawyer's office was in a quiet brick building not far from downtown, not where the glass towers of startups and tech giant campuses were, but in an old neighborhood with narrow streets where trees stretched over the road, as if trying to hide other people's secrets. I arrived half an hour early and sat there limply, feeling the remnants of my past peaceful life fading into the haze of the previous night. My hands rested on the steering wheel, and I watched absently as sunlight slid across the windshield, remembering the previous evening. The kitchen, the bright light, Damien, who thought his infidelity was just his little joys I should accept. My fingers trembled, but not from cold, from fear. I knew that if I drove away now, no one would stop me. No one but myself. The phone on the passenger seat vibrated. A text from my husband. "Booked us a table at your favorite Italian place. 7:30. Call the sitter for Mikey." I didn't open the chat, just turned the phone face down. Even those few words made my stomach clench. Dinner at my favorite restaurant sounded like some calculated plan of Damien's. My husband was either going to start convincing me again that everything was fine, sure it is, or trying to smooth things over. For once, he was taking his wife out to a restaurant instead of his mistress. I closed my eyes, feeling nauseous. I remembered how he'd sneered about the Istanbul trip yesterday, how it was supposed to be our *anniversary trip, but because of my job, he went with his mistress. And he didn't even cancel our joint dinner reservation, and I waited for him there alone, like a complete fool. Taking a deep breath, I opened my eyes. This man is not my husband, I thought. He never was, not the man I loved. With those thoughts, I got out of the car. The reception area smelled of coffee and new paper. The secretary, a woman around 50 with a short gray haircut, gave me a professional smile, the kind a woman gives when she sees other women walking in on the verge of tears every day. She asked my name and offered me a seat. I nodded and sat down in a chair by the window. On the coffee table were neatly arranged legal journals, brochures about family law, and a few children's books in the corner, probably for those who came with kids. I couldn't take my eyes off them. A small plastic dinosaur sat on a shelf, and I suddenly felt like I was going to cry over that stupid dinosaur. Because Mikey had one just like it at home. Green, only with a broken tail. Claire Brennan, I heard, and I looked up. The lawyer was younger than I expected. Dark hair was pulled back in a low bun, a gray suit, a calm face. She wasn't smiling, but there was something steady in her gaze, as if she was used to being there when someone's life was falling apart. We said hello, and she invited me into her office. Her office was bright, spacious, airy. Maybe it was the effect of the large windows facing the street. On the wall, I saw a diploma from Stanford Law School, and on her desk, a laptop, a stack of files, a glass water pitcher. She invited me to sit down, and only then did I realize I was still clutching my purse with both hands, like a shield. "How can I help you, Claire?" the lawyer asked, almost kindly. It was a simple question, ordinary, but my mouth went dry. I looked at my hands, at my wedding ring that I still hadn't taken off, and the words wouldn't come. Finally, I said, "I want a divorce from my husband." The words hung between us, real, heavy. Once they were spoken out loud, it was impossible to pretend it was just a thought, a fleeting weakness, a bad day. The lawyer nodded slightly, as if confirming she had heard. "Do you have children?" Of course, the first question was about that. "A son, he's 6. She made a note. "Why do you want a divorce from your husband?" "He's been cheating on me, for 2 years, with his employee." My voice trembled treacherously. I stopped, trying to regain control. "I found out yesterday, when I accidentally answered his phone." I smiled bitterly and, opening my phone, showed the lawyer the screenshots I'd sent myself last night. I found 2 years of messages, like these on his phone. The lawyer's expression didn't change, even as she read the saved messages between Damien and his mistress. "I presume reconciliation is completely out of the question." "No," I shook my head. "Of course not after something like this." I froze, feeling the fear rise from inside me like ice water. Yesterday, he threatened me. When it all came out, he said that if I filed for divorce, he would get full custody of our son. He has resources, connections, money. He's the head of a department at an international corporation. The office fell quiet. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop humming. The lawyer chuckled softly. "Well, of course he said that. They always say that." I looked up at her, frightened. "Listen to me carefully, Claire. The threat to take the child is one of the most common control tactics in a divorce, especially when one spouse has significantly more financial resources." I swallowed nervously and admitted. "Damien is used to getting everything he wants." But the lawyer shook her head. "A parent's income is important, but custody decisions are based on the child's best interests, not a parent's title or income. A wealthy father doesn't automatically get an advantage. And if you have been the primary caregiver, if you have taken care of the child on a daily basis, that matters. I looked at her. She wasn't saying this to comfort me. She wasn't trying to be sympathetic. She was speaking like someone who knew the facts. My heart beat faster. Not from relief, I was still too afraid to hope for complete success, but from something like a weak crack in a wall, with light on the other side. He said it so confidently yesterday, I breathed out, and he really does have almost unlimited resources. The lawyer narrowed her eyes slightly. If he is threatening to use the child as leverage, that doesn't work in his favor. She huffed softly. I need you to start documenting everything, every conversation, every promise to take your son away, any threats, even those spoken, write them down immediately after, in detail. Where, when, under what circumstances. She paused. I won't tell you this will be easy, Claire. If you decide to go through with the divorce, a storm is coming. I felt a chill run down my skin again. The lawyer looked at me intently. But the storm passes, and after it comes calm, sunny weather. The office became so quiet, I could hear my own breathing. If you're not ready, we can hold off on the paperwork for now. As if in a dream, I shook my head. No, I answered, realizing the lawyer was absolutely right. Whenever I filed for divorce, Damien's reaction would always be the same. A storm was coming for me. I want to start the process today, now if possible. The lawyer nodded. Of course. And she looked at me seriously. Of course, I understand. I left her office 2 hours later. The sun was still shining. People were still rushing. I looked at the sky. It was blue, ordinary. No one knew that a woman named Claire Brennan had just filed for divorce, that from now on her life was divided into before and after, that she would never be the same again. Chapter 9. I spent the rest of that day living as if nothing had happened. That was the most horrible discovery. Betrayal doesn't stop time, doesn't cancel work, doesn't free you from your responsibilities. The world keeps moving as if it was your asterisk life that just collapsed. So I drove to school, taught my classes, graded quizzes, answered students' questions, even smiled a couple of times automatically out of habit, the way people smile when they're too good at keeping a straight face. Today was a relatively light day for me, and right after my last class, I picked up Mikey. He ran out of the school doors with his backpack crooked, his hair a mess, and such a happy face, as if nothing bad existed in the world. For a second, it almost hurt to look at him. He believed that tonight we would all be home together, that Mom would make dinner, that Dad would come home from work and ask about his day, that a family was something solid, like the walls of our house. I wasn't going to ruin this day for him. We drove to a cafe. Mikey wanted pancakes and a strawberry milkshake. I ordered a salad and coffee that I barely touched. He chattered nonstop, about some boy in his class who pushed another at recess, about a new game he wanted for his birthday, about how maybe someday we could get a dog. I listened, nodded, responded. And inside, I was counting the hours. Tomorrow morning, the divorce papers would be delivered to Damien directly at his office. I wondered what his face would look like when he opened the envelope. Would he turn pale? Get angry? Would he immediately understand this wasn't an empty threat? After the cafe, we went for a walk. I sat on a park bench while Mikey ran around the playground. The sun was already sinking toward the horizon, gilding the trees, and everything around looked so beautiful I wanted to scream. Why can't the world look as wrecked as you feel inside? Why is the neighbor walking her dog, teenagers laughing by the fountain, someone eating ice cream, and only inside me does it feel like everything living has been burned out? Then we went home, and I made dinner. In the house that had already stopped being my family home. Everything was still in its place. The pots, the wooden spoon I bought last summer, the kids drawing on the refrigerator, the shopping list note. And yet the house felt foreign. Not because the walls had changed. Because the truth had changed. Damien came home as usual. Opened the door, put his keys on the table, loosened his tie, kissed Mikey on the top of his head. Then he looked at me. Just a second. But I saw that look. Quick assessing. He was checking my mood. Had I cooled down? Was I still angry? Had I returned to common sense yet, his asterisk version of it? I turned back to the stove, not letting him read my expression. We had dinner together. Like a family. Because I had cooked dinner for my son, and I couldn't, in front of him, demonstratively refuse his father a plate. So Damien sat at the table, too. He ate my roast chicken, asked Mikey about school, passed me the salt. At one point, he poured me a glass of water because he noticed mine was empty. An ordinary family dinner. Husband, wife, child, and a mistress somewhere off stage. I looked at Damien and thought, tomorrow everything changes. Tonight we're just playing out the final act. After dinner, we spent the evening together too. It was almost unbearable. Mikey was building a space station out of blocks on the rug. Damien sat on the floor next to him, helping. I folded laundry on the couch. At one point, Mikey climbed into his father's lap and started telling him something about school, waving his arms. Damien laughed and kissed his temple. I watched them and felt everything inside me clench. This is what families look like, the ones women endure anything for. The ones they close their eyes for. The ones they forgive affairs for. Because from the outside, we were perfect. Except that my husband had been sleeping with another woman for 2 years. Later, after putting Mikey to bed, I went straight to the guest room. Not the bedroom I shared with my husband. Most of my things were already in there anyway. As I walked past our bedroom door, Damien stepped out into the hallway. He stood in the doorway, already without his tie, his shirt unbuttoned, looking at the open door of the guest room. Then his gaze shifted to me. "Who are you putting on this act for, Claire?" he asked. I froze. Then I answered slowly. "It's not an act." I tried to walk past him, but he took 2 steps and grabbed my arm. Not hard, but firmly enough to stop me. And that touch made me shudder. "You're my wife," he said. In that low, confident voice, the same one he used in business meetings, accustomed to not being contradicted. I tried to pull my arm free. Not for much longer. His jaw tightened. "Don't be ridiculous." I looked at him and suddenly understood that for him, this really was all ridiculous. Not the affair. Not the 2 years of lies. Not the other woman. But my reaction. My moving into the guest room. My tears. That's what he saw as the problem. Not that he had destroyed our marriage, but that I had stopped acting conveniently. "You're not going anywhere," he said quietly. And somehow, those words hurt the most. Not "I'm sorry" asterisk. Not asterisk I was wrong. Not "let's talk." "You're not going anywhere." As if I were a possession. As if he had already decided for me. In that same second, I remembered last night. The phone. The messages. The photos of hotels. "I put on that lingerie you like." I couldn't breathe. I looked at his hand. The very hand now holding my wrist. That same hand had touched her. Unbuttoned her clothes. Pulled her clothes. And then come home and touched me. Tears welled up so suddenly, I couldn't stop them. I yanked my arm away. "Don't touch me." My voice broke. For a second, his face flickered with irritation. Not guilt. Not remorse. Irritation. As if I were making his life difficult. And in that moment, I understood something else. He didn't think he had lost me. He thought I was upset. That I'd be mad for a while. Sleep in another room. Cry a little. And then come back. Where else would I go? That's what he thought. That I would stay anyway. Because I had nowhere else to go. Because I was the mother of his child. Because I had been the convenient wife for too long. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I hated myself for it. Hated that he was seeing my weakness. I didn't say anything else. I just turned and almost ran into the guest room. Closed the door, turned the lock, leaned my back against it. My heart was pounding, so loud it echoed in my ears. I waited for him to come over. To knock. To demand I open the door. To say something, anything. But nothing happened. No footsteps. No knock. No voice from the other side. I stood there at first, listening. Then I slowly realized. He didn't leave me alone, so I could calm down. He wasn't that considerate. I think he just didn't care about my state at all. If he had cared, he wouldn't have cheated on me for 2 years, wouldn't have slept with his colleague, wouldn't have traveled with her while I waited at home, wouldn't have lied to my face, then come back to our bed. If he had cared. But he didn't, and I knew that for certain. He left me alone not because he felt regret or remorse, but simply because he couldn't be bothered. Because he was sure I wasn't going anywhere. I'd cry a little, then think it over and come back to his bedroom. After all, where else would I go? I sat down on the edge of the guest room bed and wiped my face. The tears were still flowing, but quietly now. I looked at the closed door and whispered, "No." The word was barely audible, but it was the most honest thing I'd said all day. No. I wasn't going back to his bedroom. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Never. Chapter 10. The next morning passed much like the previous one, with the same illusion of normalcy that we had both learned to perform. We were playing family. Breakfast together, small talk. He poured coffee as if it were the habitual gesture of a husband with no cracks in his life. I cut toast for Mikey and nodded in the right places when Damien talked about his plans for the day. From the outside, it probably looked fine. But inside, I already knew. Today it would all end differently. Because today, the paperwork was supposed to be delivered to Damien. The divorce papers. I didn't know the exact time, only that it would happen sometime during the day. And that uncertainty created a strange tension inside, like before a storm when the sky is still bright, but the air feels different. I was at school when it happened. My phone vibrated between classes, and for a second I thought about not answering. But the lawyer's name made me step into the hallway. "They've been delivered," she said without preamble. I closed my eyes. Confirmation. Yes, personally handed over. Everything is filed. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Now it's his move," she added. I thanked her and ended the call. For a while, I just stood by the window in the empty school hallway, watching cars move slowly through the parking lot. An ordinary day. People living their lives, picking up kids, buying coffee, arguing about work. And inside me, another life had already begun. One where nothing would ever be the same. When Mikey and I got home, the air in the house was different. I felt it immediately, even before I saw him. Damien was angry. Not just annoyed or tired. It was a cold, contained anger of a man who already understood everything, but hadn't yet decided exactly how to destroy things in return. Mikey was sitting at the table with an unfinished snack. Damien barely looked at him, just snapped something about homework, cutting him off mid-sentence. Mikey fell silent and dropped his gaze. "Go to your room," Damien said curtly. "But Mikey started. I said, "Go to your room." His voice rose half an octave, and that was enough. Mikey stood up, shot me a quick look, brief, almost imperceptible, and left, closing the door behind him. I was left in the kitchen with my husband. Too small a space for what was happening between us, I thought then, but there was no choice. "You actually did it?" my husband asked, narrowing his eyes. I didn't pretend not to understand. "Yes," I simply answered. Silence fell immediately, dense as glass. He chuckled, short, humorless. "Divorce, seriously, Claire." I wouldn't have gone to a lawyer if I wasn't serious. Damien sneered. And what, you think this is going to go quietly? That I'll just let you go and wave goodbye? The family I spent so long building, the wife I love, the son who carries my genes. You think I'm just going to give you your freedom? I stood by the kitchen counter, not looking away from him. I thought it would be the right thing to do, I answered. The right thing? Damien stepped closer. You want the right thing. He clicked his teeth. Fine. His voice dropped lower. Let us be honest then. If you don't care about our family, at least think about our son. You actually think the court will side with you. You really think you have a chance of taking my asterisk child away from me. The last part of his sentence was spoken, as if Mikey belonged only to him. I felt everything inside me clench. Mikey is not a possession, I said quietly. No, he nodded, but you're acting like you want to take him and disappear. That's not true, I shook my head. He will always be your son. Damien sneered again. I don't just want my son, I want my wife. He took another step toward me. I didn't step back immediately, almost imperceptibly, and that seemed to make him even angrier. I can destroy you, he said calmly, too calmly. You understand that, don't you? I stayed silent. I can make sure you leave here with nothing. Go back to Ohio to your mother and explain there why you decided to destroy our family. Every word was deliberate, cutting, aimed straight at the target. And he wasn't even shouting. That made it worse. You're an idiot, he added, almost tiredly. You actually thought you could file for divorce from me from me, Claire, and it would end the way you want. I squeezed my fingers in my palm, so hard I felt the pain. I filed for divorce because I can't live like this anymore, I finally said. He looked at me for a long time, then chuckled again, this time with contempt. We'll see how long you can't. He turned and left the kitchen so abruptly that the door hit the doorframe. I stood there alone. My heart was racing, but my body was strangely still, as if something inside me had frozen. A few minutes later, I heard him getting ready. Footsteps, the closet, keys, fast, theatrical, loud. Then the slam of the door. The car started, and the silence returned. I didn't immediately realize I was breathing. Mikey didn't come out of his room. I went upstairs to him almost automatically. He was sitting on his bed, hugging his knees, staring blankly at the wall. It's okay, I said quietly, though it was a lie. He didn't answer. I sat down next to him, but didn't touch him. Only after some time did I go back downstairs. The kitchen was the same place where it had all happened, too ordinary to contain such a conversation. I took out my phone. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened my notes app. And I started writing. Not emotions, not thoughts, facts. What he said. How he threatened. What he did to Mikey. Every word was a record of something I couldn't allow to be erased. Then I opened my chat with my lawyer and forwarded it all in one message. And only after that did I allow myself to sit down. Not because it was any easier, but because now it wasn't just inside me anymore. The evening passed in a strange, dragging emptiness. Damien didn't come back. I didn't know where he was, and honestly, I didn't try to imagine it anymore. At some point, it stopped mattering, as if he had simply stepped out of the space of our life, leaving behind only a tense atmosphere. The house was too quiet. Mikey went to bed early, but I knew he wasn't sleeping. Sometimes I heard him turning, the creak of his bed. I went to his door a few times, but didn't knock. I didn't want to disturb him further. I barely slept myself. I lay in the dark, listening to the house, its rare sounds, its creaks, its breathing. The house that had suddenly become alien, though I still lived in it. Chapter 11. The next morning, my phone rang too sharply. An unknown number. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. At moments like this, your body already knows before your mind does, something is changing. Something is beginning. Hello, I said. A short pause. And then a voice. A man's voice. Angry, at least that's how it sounded to me. Angry. He introduced himself and said, "Mrs. Brennan, I represent Damien Brennan." Then everything fell into place. The anger, the tone, the confidence, this wasn't improvisation. This was a strategy. "I'm calling to inform you that your husband has received the divorce documents and has already retained me to protect his interests." I listened without interrupting. At times like this, everything is surprisingly formal, even when people's lives are falling apart inside them. Filing for divorce does end anything by itself, nor does it automatically start a war. It starts a process. The voice on the phone continued. "My client believes that your actions are unreasonable and that you are creating a situation which may negatively affect the child." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because it sounded almost exactly like what Damien himself had said. One script, two voices. "We recommend that you refrain from any drastic action," he continued, "including moving the child without agreement and any publication of, shall we say, emotional interpretations of events." There it was. The fine line behind which the legal documentation of the conflict begins. I already knew what would come next. Damien, or his lawyer, or both, were recommending that I refrain from publicizing his infidelity, while clearly trying to use my child to do it. "And we also want to warn you right away, Mrs. Brennan," Damien's lawyer continued coldly. "Mr. Brennan will be insisting on sole custody." I couldn't breathe. I expected he might try this. I suspected it. And still, was Damien really this cruel? "What sole custody?" I breathed out. "You don't have sufficient income to support the child," the lawyer said, quite pleased with himself, sensing my fear. "We will insist that the boy remain with his father in his familiar environment, in his home, in his school, with his friends." His home, his school, his friends. He was talking about my son like an asset, like a thing to be handed over to whoever has more money. I gripped the phone, my hands shaking. Not from fear, from rage. White, hot rage rising from my stomach to my throat. "I'm his mother," I said. My voice trembled. I hated that tremor. "I've raised him for 6 years. I took him to the doctor. I read him stories. I sat with him when he had a fever. And Damien was with his mistress. And you want to give the child to him." "Mrs. Brennan," the lawyer replied calmly, "emotions won't help. Facts will help. And the facts are these. Mr. Brennan's income is 8 times higher than yours, and the court looks first at financial stability. The house is in your husband's name only. His finances are well protected. You could sue him for the property, but you'd bankrupt yourself on legal fees." I squeezed the phone tightly. Still unable to believe Damien could be so cruel. He cheated on me. He lied to my face for 2 years. And now for his own infidelity, he was going to take my son away from me. My asterisk boy, the one I carried, the one I gave birth to, the one I breastfed, the one I taught to walk, talk, read. He wanted to take him from me, out of revenge, out of a desire to win. I wasn't a wife to him, not the mother of his child. I was an opponent to be destroyed. Unable to hold back tears, I let out a ragged breath. "Have a nice day," the voice said mockingly, and hung up. I lowered the phone to the table and sat in complete silence. I stared at the phone for a few more seconds after the call, as if it could explain what had just happened. The silence in the house was dense. Not calm, dense, like the air before a storm. I dialed my lawyer's number almost automatically. It was still quite early, but she answered surprisingly quickly. "I just spoke with Damien's attorney," I said, without greeting. A short pause on the other end. Not surprise, more like the precise logging of information. "He called you directly," she clarified. "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her checking something, papers, notes, possibly correspondence. In conversations like this, there's always a sense that on the other side of the desk, everything is already sorted into folders, even if you're just trying to understand what's happening. "He shouldn't have done that," she said finally. Her voice was flatter now, colder. Not emotional, professional. and that made me feel slightly calmer. Listen to me carefully, she continued. You don't talk to him directly anymore, at all. No calls, no texts, no personal contact. I was silent. That's what I'm here for, she added. It's my job, not yours. I slowly nodded, though she couldn't see it. He didn't call you to discuss the situation, she continued. He called to test your reaction, and most likely to pressure you. The word hung in the air. Pressure. I knew too well what that looked like in reality. When someone says something to you not directly in court, not through documents, but with a voice. Fast, confident, so you don't have time to think, only to feel. Is this normal in these kinds of cases? I asked quietly. She exhaled shortly. It's a common tactic. Not always legal, not always ethical, but common. A pause. Especially when one side thinks they can control the other through fear. I tighten my fingers on the phone. What should I do if he calls again? Don't answer, she said immediately. At all. If it's really his lawyer, all communication goes through me. If he persists, we document it. Document it. Yes, her voice grew a little firmer. Screenshots, call recordings, times, content, everything. It can be used in court as evidence of pressure or violation of communication protocols through representatives. I closed my eyes. Everything was turning into a system again. Facts, documentation, evidence. Life was no longer just what was happening. It was becoming what could be proven. You're not alone in this, she added, slightly softer. And right now, the most important thing is not to engage emotionally. I laughed bitterly. That's hard. I know, she answered calmly, but that's exactly what they're counting on. A pause. He wants to throw you off balance, so you start making mistakes. I looked down the hall, toward Mikey's closed door, and suddenly understood very clearly that she was right. Every harsh word, every threat, even that morning's call, it wasn't just anger. It was an attempt to move me off my position. I understand, I said finally. Good, she replied, and one more thing. I froze. Don't discuss anything with him. Not the child, not the divorce, not his behavior. Nothing. A pause. He talks to me now, not to you. I put the phone down on the table and just sat for a long time, staring at one spot. The house fell silent again. But it was a different kind of silence. Not emptiness. A boundary. And for the first time in days, I felt not only fear, but also the fact that I, too, had a side, and on that side I was no longer alone. Chapter 12. That day, I drove to my lawyer's office with a question that should have been obvious from the start, but had only become important now. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. Not because I'd been kicked out, not because I didn't have the right to be there, but because it had become unbearably quiet and yet, at the same time, dangerous. I didn't know what to expect from Damien next. After his lawyer's call, after the anger, after the threats, a constant tension had settled inside me, as if the house was no longer a home, but a place where any return could end in another blow-up. And I caught myself thinking, I don't want to wait it out anymore. I just want a place where I can breathe. I sat down across from the lawyer, and without waiting for the formal start of the conversation, said, I want to move out, with Mikey. She didn't look surprised. She just looked at me a little more intently, like someone who had seen this state before. Okay, she answered calmly. Let's figure this out. I dropped my gaze to my hands. I can't be there anymore. I don't know what he'll do next. He's already threatened. Yesterday I stopped, then continued. He said he'd take my child, that I'd be left with nothing. My voice broke on the last word. I took a breath. I want a normal place, a place where Mikey can feel safe, where I'm not constantly waiting for things to blow up again. The lawyer listened without interrupting. And when I finished, she nodded as if this were exactly what she'd expected to hear, not as an emotion, but as a logical stage of the case. Look, she said, softly but clearly. From a legal standpoint, you are not required to move out of the marital home immediately. I tensed. She raised her hand, stopping the potential tension on my face. Even if the house is in his name, even if he's the primary owner, until there's a court order, it's considered the asterisk marital residence. Both parents have a right to be there. I nodded slowly. But she continued. But in reality, in family cases, it's not always just about legal rights. It's about strategy and safety. I stayed silent. You already have a conflict. You have threats. You have lawyers on both sides. And you have a child who feels all of this. That part hit harder than the rest. And if you stay there, she continued, the situation will likely only intensify, psychologically and legally. She leaned forward slightly. The court needs to see that the child has a stable environment, calm, without constant tension between the parents. I asked quietly, so it's better for me to leave? She didn't say yes immediately. It's better for you to create a separate, stable space for yourself and Mikey, she corrected. And yes, in your situation, that is a reasonable next step. A pause. But not abruptly, not impulsively, not packed a bag and disappeared. I nodded. She continued more concretely. We do this the right way. Find housing that can be justified as stable for the child. Document that this is a temporary or separate residence. Notify the other party through their attorney. And if necessary, file for temporary court orders to secure your right to live separately with the child. I listened, and for the first time in a long while, something like a structure began to emerge from the chaos. Not salvation, but at least a direction. You're not obligated to stay where you feel emotionally unsafe, she added more quietly. And you certainly shouldn't live in constant anticipation of conflict. I slowly breathed out, and only then realized that all this time, that's exactly how I had been living, waiting for the next blow, the next call, the next outburst. I just want things to be calm, I said quietly. She nodded. Then that's where we're heading. And for the first time in a long time, the thought of leaving that house stopped feeling like panic. It became a decision. Careful, incomplete, but already mine. Chapter 13. I drove home feeling like something inside me was slowly coalescing into a denser form. Not Kamzo. Rather, a decision that hadn't yet taken shape in words, but had already stopped feeling like doubt. I thought about what the lawyer had said, about separate housing, about stability for Mikey, about how I wasn't obligated to stay where I was scared and felt as if I couldn't breathe. And for the first time in a long time, that didn't sound like defeat. It sounded like a way out. As I pulled up to the house, I spotted his car immediately. Damien was already home, too early for his usual schedule. Too late to save our family. I paused for a moment, just sitting behind the wheel, staring at the facade of the house. An ordinary house. Quiet. Too quiet for what was happening inside it. I exhaled and got out. He opened the door before I could get my keys out. As if it were no longer a shared space, but his asterisk territory. His face was tense, controlled, cold. Come in, he said mockingly, letting me inside, while I'm still allowing you to be here. He stood in the doorway, not moving back, effectively blocking the entrance. I stopped on the threshold. Damien looked me up and down and smirked. Then I saw Mikey's colorful little backpack in the foyer, and I knew immediately that he'd already picked him up from school. I turned to my husband. Did you take Mikey out of school? He smirked and nodded, as if he'd been waiting for exactly that. I'm his father, I have rights. What do rights have to do with it? He still had classes scheduled. He stepped closer. Don't tell me how to handle my son, Claire. It might end badly for you. I felt that familiar tension rise inside me again, the same one I had been trying to get away from today. Are you threatening me? I asked quietly. He snorted. A pause. Didn't my lawyer explain what's waiting for you if you keep being stubborn? You know, You could lose your child if you keep playing these games. I froze. There it was. Again. No one is playing games, I said, and stop talking about Mikey like that. He laughed humorlessly. I'm talking about reality. He stepped closer again. You think you can just leave me, and I'll just swallow that. I felt my fingers clench on their own. I'm not just leaving you, I replied. I'm leaving because you cheated on me, because you slept with your employee for 2 years, because faithfulness in marriage was a joke to you. Silence. For a second, Damien hesitated, as if he finally understood. But then he only answered coldly. I told you I wouldn't let you destroy our life, and I meant it, Claire. Whatever it costs me, I will stop you. I looked at him, and suddenly I understood very clearly. For him, this wasn't a conflict. This was a battle for the right to decide. You're wrong, I said quietly in response. You can't do anything, because the truth is on my side. A pause. We'll see, Damien narrowed his eyes. But I'm warning you. If you make a move without my agreement, I'll start a process you won't be able to stop. I looked at him and understood. This was no longer just a threat. This was a warning, dressed as a strategy. And for the first time in all this time, I felt not only fear, but also a very clear realization. This was war. Not over our son, not over our marriage. Over who would control everything. Whose word would be final. For my husband, it seemed that was the only thing that mattered. Chapter 14. I found an apartment faster than I expected. Too fast, almost suspiciously calm, considering what had been happening in my life over the past weeks. Small, bright, without unnecessary details. Not a home yet, more like a temporary refuge. But for the first time in a long time, I felt as if there I could just close the door and not wait for a conversation that would ruin my day. I confirmed everything with my lawyer right away. We discussed the details as if we weren't talking about escaping my own life, but a standard legal step, a change of residence during divorce proceedings. She reviewed the lease carefully, asked questions about the timing, the school's proximity for Mikey, the distance from Damien's current home. And only then said, this is a reasonable option. The court needs the child to have a stable environment, even when parents live separately. I nodded, though I still felt like any move could be a mistake. Then she added, but there's one important thing. I tensed. She opened a folder of documents. We will notify Damien's attorney of your move. This is standard practice in family cases. Otherwise, it could be interpreted as an attempt to hide the child's whereabouts. I slowly exhaled. And he might object, I asked. She didn't avoid the answer. Yes. And that yes hung in the air heavier than any explanation. A few hours later, the response came from his side. Not from him personally, from his attorney. Formal, cold, without emotion. I read the email twice. It stated that the father of the child does not consent to the minor's relocation. Any move of the child outside the current place of residence without his written consent would be considered a violation of the * status quo custody arrangement. In the event of an attempted move, they would immediately file an emergency motion temporary restraining order in the custody context to prevent changing the child's place of residence pending a hearing. I put my phone down and stared at the wall for a long time. I was beginning to process legal terminology almost as a separate language, another reality, parallel, where feelings didn't weigh anything, only wording mattered. My lawyer called almost immediately after the email. I stepped out of my classroom briefly, giving my students an assignment. I saw your husband's attorney's response, she said. And a pause. It's expected, she answered calmly. In these cases, the other parent almost always tries to preserve the status quo until a court decision. I closed my eyes. What does that mean for me? It means, she said, that you can move, but not with the child. I sat up straight. So I can't take Mikey. Not right now, she clarified. Until a temporary court order or an agreement between parties, you have to maintain the child's current living arrangements. I felt panic rising inside me. But I can't stay there, I said quietly. I understand, she answered immediately, and we will use that in court too. A pause. But courts in these situations are very cautious about moving children. They avoid decisions that look like asterisk unilateral relocation asterisk, moving without the other parent's consent. I was silent. She continued. The safest legal step right now is for you to move alone. The child stays at the current address until the first hearing or a temporary order. The words fell evenly, without emotion. But for me, they sounded different. Like separation. Like a line I couldn't cross without consequences. What if I take him with me? I asked quietly. The pause was longer. Then he will immediately file an emergency motion to return the child and will claim that you violated the custody status quo. And the court might order the child returned pending the hearing. I closed my eyes. There it was. The legal reality where leaving and leaving with a child were two entirely different worlds. I understand, I finally said. I put my phone on the table and sat in the silence for a long time. The apartment had been found. The move was almost ready. But I couldn't move without my child. After the call, I went back to my classroom and tried to continue the lesson. The kids were already in their seats, books open, the usual classroom noise, rustles, pencils, quiet conversations. Everything looked as if nothing had happened. As if my life hadn't cracked down the middle and was only holding together out of habit. I talked about the lesson's topic, asked questions, wrote answers on the board, and hardly recognized my own voice. It sounded right, but it didn't belong to me. We got to the end of the lesson somehow automatically. I collected the notebooks, dismissed the class, and only then felt how heavy it was to keep a straight face when another conversation was going on inside me the whole time. During the break, I went out into the hallway, and I almost immediately saw Linda. She was standing by her classroom door with a folder in her hands, checking some sheets before her next class. Calm, composed as always. Spanish teacher, my colleague for 5 years, a person who knew more about me than anyone here. She knew about Damien, about Mikey, about how we started, and about what it had gradually become. I walked up to her, stopped, opened my mouth, but at first couldn't say anything. The words were stuck somewhere in my throat. Linda looked up. Hey, she said softly, are you okay? And at that moment, something inside me finally gave way. He won't let me take my child, I breathed out. He wants sole custody of Mikey and he's doing everything to get it. Her face changed instantly. Not drastically, but enough for me to notice. And before she could respond, I just broke down. I cried right there in the school hallway. Right in the middle of the sounds of students leaving their classrooms. I didn't care. I didn't even try to stop it. The words came out on their own, in pieces without structure. He's threatening to take Mikey. He says I destroyed everything. And he has the means, the status. He has a high position at his company. I couldn't stop. I just kept talking and talking. Linda didn't interrupt. She just stepped closer and hugged me. Tight. Without questions. For real. And that felt worse and better at the same time, because at that moment, I finally stopped holding it together. I buried my face in her shoulder and just sobbed. Linda stroked my back and repeated quietly, "It's going to be okay, I'll help." And those words didn't sound like a movie promise. They sounded like an attempt to hold me here, in this hallway, in this reality, while everything else was falling apart somewhere outside the school walls. I don't know how long it lasted. Until, through the noise in my head, I felt a gaze. I turned my head. And I saw her. Sophie's mom. She was standing by the classroom door, a folder in her hands, as if she was just waiting for her child or a meeting with a teacher. I knew her by sight, parent-teacher conferences, school events, brief conversations. "Hello, how's it going?" She had always been polite, reserved, unobtrusive. And now she was just standing there, watching. I understood in that same second. She had heard enough. Not everything, but enough. And instead of looking away or pretending nothing had happened, she didn't leave. There was no curiosity in her gaze. And no judgment. Just silence. Sympathy. And something else. A calm, very human warmth that, for some reason, made it hurt even more and feel slightly lighter at the same time. She gave me a small nod, very carefully, almost imperceptibly. As if she were saying without words, "I see, and I won't look away." And in that moment, I realized that my world had stopped being private a long time ago. Chapter 15. She came over to me, a lovely woman around 40. Short haircut, calm eyes, and a gentle smile that didn't pressure, only warmed. She approached as if she'd known me her whole life, without awkwardness, without embarrassment, like someone who knew how to help. "Mrs. Brennan," she said quietly, "I'm sorry for intruding. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I heard you're having trouble." I wiped my tears. I was ashamed. A French teacher crying in the school hallway, in front of a student's mother, in front of a woman who might be thinking, "What kind of unstable person is teaching my child?" I pulled myself together. I smiled. Falsely, but I smiled. "It's okay, really," I lied. "Just a tough day." She looked at me, intently, warmly, the way you look at children who say it doesn't hurt when they have a fever. "No, it's not okay," she said gently. "I heard enough, your husband, the infidelity, the lawyer." I nodded. Tears welled up again. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. Sophie's mom took my hand. Her palm was dry and warm. "My husband works at the same company as your husband," she said carefully. "Not in the finance department. He's elsewhere. But that's not important. What's important is that I know a couple of good lawyers. I'll give you their numbers. And also—" She paused, looked around. The hallway was empty. Just the two of us and Linda, who had moved to the window to give us privacy. "I'll talk to my husband," she continued. "Don't worry. I'll just tell him that there's someone at the company who, well, you understand. Maybe he can do something." I didn't understand, but I didn't ask. I was too broken to ask questions, too exhausted to look for hidden motives. "Oh, you don't have to," I said automatically. "I appreciate your offer, but Damien, he has a high-ranking position. Your husband could get in trouble because of this. I'll manage. I'll try to manage." "Claire," she said, using my first name for the first time. "May I call you Claire? You can't manage alone. No one manages alone. I've been in a similar situation, not with my husband, with my brother. I know what betrayal is. I know how much it hurts. And I know that accepting help isn't weakness." I looked at her calm eyes, at her confidence, and I thought about Mikey, about how if I lost in court I would lose him, I would lose my son, and then help wouldn't matter anymore because I wouldn't exist. Not physically, I'd still be alive, but I'd be dead inside. "Thank you," I said. "Really, thank you." She hugged me, lightly like you hug old friends, and then she left. And I stood there in the hallway, surrounded by backpacks and children's drawings on the walls, thinking, maybe not everyone is a monster. Maybe there are those who help just because. Not for money, not for a favor. Just because they remember their own pain and don't want others to go through the same thing. Linda came over to me, put her hands on my shoulders. "Claire," she said, "you'll get through this. I'm here for you. The whole staff is here for you. You have us." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and went to prepare for my next class, because life goes on, even when you think it's over. Chapter 16. That evening, Damien came home later than usual. I heard the front door open, heard him walk into the living room. He walked in with a confident, steady stride, as if he were the master of the situation. He is the master of the situation, asterisk, I thought then. I was standing in the kitchen, pretending to clean up, though I'd been holding the same plate for a while. He appeared in the doorway. Seeing him, I noticed he was too calm for what had been going on between us the last few days. We need to talk, he said immediately. I slowly put the plate in the sink. If it's about the divorce again, I'm not ready to discuss it right now, I replied. He smirked. You're already discussing it with lawyers. I'm just clarifying reality. I turned to face him. What reality? He walked further into the kitchen, unhurried and proprietary, letting me know that all of this was still his space, without restrictions. The reality is this, he said calmly. You're living in my house, using everything here. A pause. And at the same time, you're destroying my family. I exhaled sharply. I'm not destroying the family, Damien. I'm trying to get out of a situation where I'm being threatened. He nodded, as if that didn't matter. Then you have a choice. I tensed. What choice? He stopped in front of me. Either you move out, or you compensate for your stay here. I frowned. Compensate. He looked at me, as if he were explaining the obvious. Yes, this is my house. I pay for it. I support life here. I slowly shook my head. Are you seriously suggesting I pay you for living here with our child? He didn't answer right away. I don't need money, but I miss your warmth in my bed. You're kidding me, right? I gasped. Or you can leave, he repeated, shrugging. I felt everything inside me clench. This isn't a discussion, I said more quietly. This is pressure. He tilted his head slightly. Call it what you want. A pause. And then he added, more evenly. Either you understand how reality works, or you keep playing at your divorce. I stepped back. I've already filed for divorce, I said. This isn't a game. He smirked. Then don't be surprised by the consequences. I clenched my fingers. What consequences? He looked me straight in the eye. For instance, you losing access to this house. I exhaled sharply. Are you threatening to evict me? I'm setting conditions, he corrected. I felt my voice shake, but I tried to hold steady. And Mikey, I asked. He didn't answer immediately. And that pause was worse than any answer. Mikey will stay where he is most stable, he said finally. I froze. You can't just decide that. He stepped closer. I can, and the court will see who is creating stability and who is creating chaos. I looked at him and understood the conversation was going back to the same place. Threats, control, pressure. You're trying to force me to leave, I said. He shrugged calmly. I'm offering you a choice. His finger trailed down my neck. I jerked back. That's not a choice. He looked at me intently and laughed softly. Then make a different one. A pause. End this divorce, Claire, and we won't have a problem. I shot him a look. You want me to just cancel everything? I want you to stop destroying what we have, he said. I felt anger rise inside me. There's nothing left. He didn't react immediately. Then he only said quietly, There's Mikey. Those words hung in the air. And they were the most dangerous. I slowly nodded. Yes, I said, there is Mikey. A pause. I stepped back. And that's exactly why I won't stay in a situation where I have to choose between fear and a home. He stared at me for a long time, then smirked slightly. We'll see what the court says. And he turned away, as if the conversation was over for him. I stayed standing in the kitchen. My hands were shaking. And I realized that all this time, he wasn't talking about the house. He was talking about control over what I hadn't yet lost. All night I listened for sounds, afraid Damien might decide to come into my room and demand payment for my stay. No wonder I only fell asleep toward morning. And I woke up just a few hours later, even before my alarm. I didn't wake up because I was well rested, quite the opposite. My sleep was so fragmented and shallow that it simply wore itself out. I lay there and listened to the house, and thought about what to do next. I picked up my phone before I even got out of bed. And I texted my lawyer. Surprisingly, she answered quickly, informing me that Damien couldn't just evict me. I exhaled, but the tension didn't fully leave. Even if the house is in his name, I wrote in a new message. Even if the house is solely in his name, she confirmed. This house was purchased during the marriage. Therefore, your husband cannot unilaterally deny you access without a court order. I closed my eyes. And if he changes the locks? A pause. If he tries, that would be a violation of procedure, and we would document it. I slowly exhaled. He talked about it yesterday, as if it were already decided. He can say whatever he wants, she replied, but that's not the same as a court order. After a short pause, the lawyer sent another message. Claire, in these cases, the parties often try to create pressure, especially when there's a dispute over the child and the divorce has already started. The word pressure brought back the feeling of last night. I remembered his blackmail, remembered how he threatened to kick me out if I didn't sleep with him. That's not a legal requirement, I said quietly to myself. That's an attempt at control. Meanwhile, the lawyer advised me to stick to the plan, not to react to Damien's verbal demands, not to engage in direct negotiations with him, and not to leave the house under pressure from his threats. I stared at the wall. And if he starts again? Then you document it, she answered immediately, and you tell me everything goes through me. I exhaled, closed my eyes for a second, and thanked my lawyer. After that, I sat still for a while longer. The house around me was the same, but how everything had changed. It was no longer our warm family home. Now it was a place where a man lived who was trying to break me. Chapter 17. Everything changed that evening. Radically. I was sitting in the living room, grading high school French essays. Ordinary work, ordinary mistakes, ordinary corrections with a red pen. All of it was supposed to keep me grounded, in a familiar structure where I at least understood the rules. That's why I was working at home. To avoid thinking. To avoid listening to the silence. To avoid waiting for footsteps in the hallway. But that evening, everything still fell apart. Damien came home too early. I knew it immediately, by how abruptly the door opened, by the heavy sound of his footsteps, by how the air in the house seemed to shift. He threw his bag on the floor, heavily. With a thud, I looked up. His face was red. His eyes were blazing. He was shaking, with anger, with fury, with helplessness. I had never seen him like this. Not when a major contract fell through. Not when he was demoted 5 years ago. He was livid. It was you, he said. His voice trembled. You did this. Did what? I put the essay down. My heart started pounding faster, but I didn't let it show. I looked at him calmly, the way a teacher looks at a misbehaving student. That mother of your student, he snarled. Sophie, her husband, he's the CEO of my corporation. Did you know? Did you know you teach the CEO's daughter? I froze. No, I didn't know. Honestly, I didn't. I had seen the girl's last name on the roster, Harrison. But in Silicon Valley, there are hundreds of Harrisons. I never checked parents' job titles. I didn't care. I taught children, not their parents. That was my rule. I wanted everyone in my class to be equal. So no one felt special because of money or connections. So I didn't ask. So I didn't know. I didn't know, I told the truth. Really. Don't lie to me, he shouted. I jumped. I hadn't expected shouting. Damien never shouted. He was controlled, calculating, cold. Shouting was a sign that the control was lost, that he was breaking. You sent that woman on purpose. You wanted to destroy me. I didn't send anyone, I said firmly. Sophie's mom came up to me herself. She heard me crying in the hallway. She felt sorry for me, which is more than you ever did. Damien wasn't listening. He was pacing the room. His hands were shaking. He would sit, then stand. Clench his fists, then unclench them. That woman's husband, he began, and his voice got quieter but angrier, called me into his office today, along with Emma. Said the company has strict rules, no relationships with subordinates. Said a scandal like this means termination. Immediately, for both of us. I was silent. Do you understand what this means? He turned to me. There was hatred in his eyes, pure, untainted hatred. I looked into those eyes and didn't recognize the man I had married. I lost my job because of you. Because of me? I couldn't believe my ears. You've been sleeping with your subordinate for 2 years, and that's because of me. If you hadn't blabbed to your colleague, if that mother hadn't overheard, if you had just kept your mouth shut like a normal wife. Like a normal wife, I repeated, the one who looks the other way. He didn't answer. The one who lives with lies, I continued. The one who pretends nothing is happening. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel fear. I'm not the normal wife, Damien, I said quietly. I'm the wife who won't forgive you for this. He froze. 1 second. 2. And for the first time, I saw that he didn't know what to do next. He went still, looked at me. For the first time, I think, he realized that I wasn't backing down, that I wasn't going to cry, that I wasn't going to fall to my knees and beg him to stay. I was standing straight, looking him in the eye, and I wasn't afraid. Are you happy now? He asked. His voice cracked. You destroyed my career. I'm nobody now, with a reference that's worthless. No respectable company will take me, and Emma, she'll probably leave the country. With a past like hers, no one will hire her. He looked at me as if I had stabbed him, and at that moment I suddenly understood to the depths of my soul, to my very marrow, to the last cell. He wasn't angry that I had found out the truth. He wasn't angry that he had hurt me. He wasn't angry that he had betrayed our family. He was angry that the truth had come out, that he had lost his status, his money, his power, that his perfect life had collapsed. Not because of me, because of him, but he would never admit it. You know what, Damien? I stood up, walked right up to him, looked him in the eye. I didn't destroy your career. You did. You did it the first time you cheated on me, the first time you chose her over me, the first time you lied to my face. You remember that. He spat on the floor, turned around, walked out, slammed the door so hard the walls shook. I stayed alone, in the living room, surrounded by essays and children's toys. I stood there and looked at the closed door. And I didn't cry. I smiled. For the first time in many days. I smiled because I understood he had lost. Not in court, not in money, in life. He had lost himself. Chapter 18. 6 months have passed. I'm sitting on the balcony of my small apartment in Mountain View. 2 bedrooms, a tiny kitchen, an old couch I bought on sale. But there's a balcony where Mikey and I drink hot chocolate in the evenings, watch the lights of San Jose, make plans for the weekend. He tells me about school, about his friends, about how he's learning to build new robots. He's almost 7 now. He's growing. He's becoming my protector, my support, my reason to keep going. Mikey still goes to Bellevue, the same school where I work, the employee discount, one of the few perks I have left. Every morning, we drive there together. Mom, you look pretty today, he says. I smile. I know I don't look pretty. I have dark circles under my eyes, I've lost 2 dress sizes, my hair is split at the ends. But to him, I'm beautiful. That's all that matters. At school, almost no one looks at me with pity. Linda hugs me every morning. The principal asked if I needed help. Sophie Harrison, that same little girl, is now one of my favorite students. She speaks French with perfect pronunciation. I'm proud of her. After lessons, I sometimes have tea with her mom. We've become friends. I thank her. She laughs. I didn't do anything. It was my husband's decision. He can't stand it when employees violate ethics. We laugh, drink tea. Watch the sunset. She asks how I'm doing. I say, good, really good. Alan Harrison turned out to be a man of principles, a rare thing in Silicon Valley. People say he even cut his own bonus last year so the employees could get more. People like that exist. I believe it. Damien pays child support. The court ordered it. His new, less expensive lawyer turned out not to be as scary as the first one. When I showed the printouts of the messages, all those screenshots I took that night on the kitchen floor, the judge looked at Damien in a way that made him turn pale. Custody remained with me. Damien sees Mikey twice a month, under supervision, at a special center. The first time he came, he brought flowers. For me, I didn't take them. I said, flowers are too late, Damien, too late. The second time he came without flowers, but with red eyes. He said, "Claire, I destroyed everything." I stayed silent. He said, smirking, "I thought I could do anything, that my status and my money could indulge any whim." Damien shook his head. "It's a long way down from Olympus." I looked at him and felt nothing. Emptiness. The same emptiness I felt on the kitchen floor. But now it didn't crush me. Now it was my silence, my peace. During one visit, he cried. I saw him show emotion for the first time just because. Not at a wedding, not at the birth of his son, but in a supervised visitation room under the watch of a social worker. He cried, his shoulders shaking, and he whispered, "I love you, Claire. I've always loved only you. It was an eclipse. I don't know what came over me." I listened and didn't believe him, couldn't believe him, because his lies and his affair had gone on far too long. Eventually, after being out of work for about a year, Damien moved to Texas. People say he works at some small firm where no one cares about his past. I don't check. I don't care. He calls once a week, talks to Mikey, tries to talk to me. I answer shortly, politely, like he's a stranger. Once, I even told him I wished him happiness. It was true, actually. I wish him happiness, but that happiness won't be me anymore. And he will never be my happiness again. That chapter of my life is closed. That evening, I sat on the balcony for a long time. Mikey was already asleep. I watched the lights of San Jose and thought about how much my life had changed over the past year and a half. I lost my husband, lost my home. But I didn't lose myself. I didn't lose my faith in people. I remember that evening. The smell of jasmine, the phone on the counter, her voice. Her message, "Your wife is cooking you dinner, but I'm getting myself ready for the morning. It still hurts. Maybe it will always hurt, but the pain isn't sharp anymore. It's dull. It aches at night. It comes when I see happy couples in the park. When Mikey asks, 'Mom, does Dad not love us anymore?' I answer, 'He does, sweetie. He just lives far away now, and you and I will be okay.' And I believe that. I'll be okay. We'll be okay. I don't regret answering that call. I never will. If I hadn't answered, I'd still be living a lie, making his coffee, ironing his shirts, waiting at night, believing, hoping, loving a ghost. But now I know the truth. Bitter as it is, it's mine asterisk. I deserve the truth. I deserve to know who I was sharing my bed with, sharing my life with, sharing my future with. And I am okay, really, for the first time in a long time. I have Mikey, his laughter in the morning, his drawings on the refrigerator, his question, "Mom, do you love me?" And my answer, "More than anything in the world." I have a job I love and students who say merci with the right accent. I have this tiny apartment with a balcony that doesn't smell of jasmine. The neighbors don't grow jasmine, but of coffee and freedom. I have me who didn't break, me who survived, me who looks at the past and doesn't fall, me who is building a new future. Sometimes in the evening, I open the window. The wind carries the scent of a flowering bush from the neighbor's yard. Sweet, heavy, almost like the one in Palo Alto. My heart clenches for a second, but I take a breath and let it go because it's just a smell, because May is over, because my life now is only mine. And that is beautiful. The end.